When his towel slipped down to the floor, I forgot how to breathe, not because of what I saw, but because of the way he looked at me after it happened. He didn't cover himself. He didn't laugh or pretend it was an accident. He just laid there on the massage table, face up now, meeting my gaze like he was waiting to see what I'd do next. And that's when I realized this wasn't just a massage anymore. We'd been friends for over 6 years, the kind of friendship that starts out casual, gym buddies, weekend beers, shared playlists, but slowly grows into something deeper without anyone really noticing. His name was Luke. Handsome in that effortless, straight guy next door kind of way. Tan skin, broad shoulders, the kind of smile that made you forget your point mid-sentence. I was a licensed massage therapist, and I worked out of a small, clean home studio I'd set up in my apartment's spare room. It was mostly regular clients, stressed out office workers, amateur athletes, people who didn't stretch enough. I loved the work. I liked helping people feel better. And I never crossed boundaries, ever. Luke had joked for years about booking a session. "Man, one of these days, you've got to fix whatever's going on back here," he'd say, gesturing to his lower back dramatically. But it wasn't until last week, after he tweaked something during a long drive, that he finally asked if I was serious about giving him one. He showed up on a Thursday evening, wearing a hoodie and gym shorts, his hair still wet from a shower. He smelled like cedar soap and something warmer, something him. I played it cool, professional, I always did. "Strip to whatever you're comfortable with," I told him, like I said to every client, "and lie face down under the towel." I stepped out while he undressed and returned to find him already in position. Towel draped over his hips, arms at his sides, head turned to the left. I dimmed the light slightly, added a bit of lavender to the diffuser, and pressed play on a soft instrumental playlist. "Still nervous?" I asked. "Nah," he said, voice muffled against the cradle. "Just sore. Been sitting too much lately." I smiled, warmed a bit of oil in my hands, and started working up his back slowly. I always start with light pressure, just enough to ease someone into it. But as I moved down to his lower back, I could feel him exhale deeper. His body softened under my palms. He wasn't just sore, he was exhausted. "This part tight?" I asked, kneading into the tension near his spine. He groaned lightly. "Yeah, right there. Damn." I felt his muscles respond to every touch, the way his body almost leaned into my hands. It was subtle at first, just the usual reactions. But the longer I worked, the more I noticed the shift, the way his breath changed, the way his fingers gripped the edge of the table. I moved to his legs, kneading into his thighs with long, controlled strokes, careful and respectful. But I couldn't ignore the way my pulse had started to rise. Something electric passed between us, unspoken but undeniable. And then, when I asked him to turn over, it happened. The towel didn't hold, and he didn't reach for it. He just looked up at me, chest rising and falling, mouth slightly parted. And I stood there, oil still on my hands, heartbeat pounding in my ears. Neither of us said a word, but the room didn't feel quiet. It felt heavy, charged, like every breath was holding a question we hadn't asked out loud yet. I looked at him, lying there on the table. No towel, no tension in his face. There was no panic, no embarrassment, just a kind of steady curiosity in his eyes, as if he was watching to see what I'd do next. I took a breath and stepped closer, telling myself to stay calm, professional, focused. But the truth was, professionalism had already left the room. My fingers were still slick with oil, and every part of me was aware of how close we were to crossing a line that couldn't be uncrossed. "I can grab another towel," I said, voice quiet, cautious. He didn't move. "Do you want to?" It was the first time he'd said something that sounded more like an invitation than a question, and it hit me low in the stomach, warm and unsteady. I shook my head slowly, unsure if I was answering for him or for me. He nodded once, like we'd just agreed on something without saying it out loud. I moved closer, placed one hand gently on his shoulder, the other on his chest. His skin was warm, smooth, pulsing gently beneath my palm. He inhaled sharply, but didn't pull back. "I'm not going to do anything you don't want," I said, barely above a whisper. He looked up at me. "I know." It wasn't permission. It was something deeper than that. Trust, maybe. Or hope. My hand moved slowly down his chest, skimming over the flat lines of his abs, pausing just above his hip. His breathing deepened, but he still didn't stop me. His fingers flexed slightly at his sides, and when my thumb brushed just beneath the edge of where the towel had been, his eyes fluttered closed. I leaned in, not all the way, not yet, and hovered just above him. I could smell the lavender still lingering in the air, feel the warmth radiating off his skin. Everything in my body told me to go slow, to savor, to make sure this wasn't just heat or timing or circumstance. And then he reached for me. One hand on the back of my neck, pulling me down, lips finding mine in a kiss that was soft at first, hesitant, like we were both waiting to see if this was real. But when I didn't pull back, when I kissed him again, deeper, slower, his other hand slid across my lower back, and suddenly, we weren't wondering anymore. We were there. The table creaked beneath him as he shifted to sit up slightly, pulling me closer. Our bodies pressed together, warm skin against warm skin, oil-slicked hands exploring, learning. His mouth moved to my neck, and I gasped. Quiet, involuntary, but real. Every inch of me was alive, awake, locked into this moment. We didn't speak. There wasn't anything left to say. It wasn't about rushing. It wasn't even about sex, not yet. It was about contact, skin, trust, permission. Longing that had gone unnamed for too long, finally being given a place to land. I guided him gently back onto the table, fingers tracing the edge of his jaw, then down his chest, circling the lines of his hip. He arched slightly under my touch, eyes never leaving mine, like he wanted me to see all of him, every reaction, every breath, every silent yes. And I did, every part of him. And when I leaned in again, our mouths met, not with hesitation this time, but with certainty. That night lingered long after he left. He had stayed just a little while longer, towel eventually wrapped loosely back around his waist. But the mood between us had changed completely. What was once casual friendship had stepped into something new, something uncertain but undeniably real. I cleaned up the studio like always, but everything felt different. The massage oil still warm in the bottle, the faint scent of him still clinging to the table, the memory of his hands on me as fresh as if they were still there. I didn't sleep much. Every time I closed my eyes, I remembered the way he looked at me just before he kissed me. The question in his eyes, the trust. It wasn't just heat or lust. It had been mutual, intentional, wanted. But we hadn't talked about what it meant, and maybe that's what kept me tossing in bed until sunrise. The next day, I didn't text him. I wanted to. I drafted a dozen messages in my head, but I didn't hit send. I didn't want to seem too eager, or worse, make him feel awkward if he wasn't sure how to talk about it yet. By late afternoon, I'd convinced myself he might need space, or maybe he regretted it, or maybe it was just one of those moments that only make sense in the dark. But then, just after dinner, he texted me. "Still sore. Any chance of a follow-up?" I stared at my phone like it had just come to life. My heart jumped in my chest. The words were simple, playful even, but the double meaning wasn't lost on me. I kept my reply short. "Anytime. You know where to find me." He showed up the next evening. This time, he didn't wear gym clothes, just jeans and a soft-fitted t-shirt. His hair was still damp from the shower, and when he stepped into the room, he didn't wait for instructions. He just smiled, kicked off his shoes, and said, "I figured we could skip the formalities." I swallowed hard. Right. Yeah. The session started differently. I didn't ask him to lie down. He walked up to the table and just leaned against it, facing me. We stood there for a long moment, neither of us moving, neither of us speaking, but But everything was loud. The tension, the anticipation, the silent acknowledgement of what we'd both been replaying in our minds since the last time. "I haven't stopped thinking about it," he said. "Me neither." That's all it took. He reached for me first this time, hand at my waist, pulling me gently toward him. Our lips met again, slower than before, but deeper, with the kind of certainty that doesn't ask questions. I wrapped my arms around his back, feeling the heat through his shirt, the way his body curved into mine. Eventually, I guided him to sit on the table again, but this time there was no towel, no pretense. I moved behind him, hands on his shoulders, working into the muscles with purpose. But it wasn't just massage now, it was closeness, a way to keep touching without having to say everything we were feeling out loud. He tilted his head back against me as I moved lower, fingertips grazing skin I hadn't touched before. His breath hitched. He didn't speak, but his body told me everything I needed to know. When he turned around, eyes searching mine, I saw the same thing I had seen the night before. Want, yes, but also something more patient, more deliberate. This time, we didn't stop at the edge of a kiss. And this time, neither of us hesitated to let it happen. The sun had barely dipped below the skyline when he pulled me back toward him, and this time, there was no hesitation in either of us. The massage table, once a boundary between client and therapist, had turned into something else entirely. A place where we were finally seeing each other without layers, without distance, without fear. He tugged at the hem of my shirt, lifting it over my head slowly, fingers grazing my skin as if memorizing every inch. I let him. My hands found his waist, warm and solid beneath the cotton of his shirt, and I leaned in, resting my forehead against his chest for a moment just to feel his breath. His fingers threaded through my hair, gentle but sure, and he tipped my face up to kiss me again, longer this time, slower, like he was tasting the truth of everything we hadn't said. I kissed him back with the same quiet urgency, a deep hunger wrapped in care. There was no performance, no pretending, just honesty in every touch. When I moved around to face him fully, he reached for my hands and placed them back on his skin, guiding them across his chest and down to his hips. His body responded to me like we'd been here before, even though we hadn't, and I could feel the tension coiling low in my stomach, a mixture of nerves and desire building with every second. "I've never done this before," he whispered. I pulled back slightly, heart catching. "With a guy?" He nodded, searching my face. "But with you, it doesn't feel weird, it just feels right." The sincerity in his voice melted something in me I didn't know was still frozen. I stepped closer, brushing my thumb along his jaw. "We go slow. We go your pace." He smiled, soft, grateful, a little nervous, and kissed me again. This time, when our bodies pressed together, there was no barrier. We were skin to skin, breath to breath, our hands moving without planning, without permission, just instinct and trust. I laid him back on the table gently, guiding him down as if I were still in work mode, but everything about it had shifted. My hands still knew the rhythm, the right spots, the points that drew out a moan or a quiet breath. But now I was exploring, not to relieve pain, but to create pleasure. He arched beneath me when I pressed into his lower back, the tension melting beneath my palms, and he looked at me like I had undone something deeper than just a muscle knot. My lips found his collarbone, his shoulder, the dip just below his ear. Every reaction pulled me in further, and the room felt warmer, quieter, more intimate than ever before. When he reached for me again, it wasn't rushed. He was inviting me into something, and I accepted that invitation without needing words. We didn't rush, we took our time, and when we finally crossed that invisible line, when our bodies moved together not just in touch, but in rhythm, it wasn't frantic or wild, it was slow, it was deliberate, it was new for him and somehow new for me too, even though I'd been here before. Afterward, we stayed there, tangled on the table, the room dim, the scent of lavender still thick in the air. I traced lazy circles on his chest, and he played with the edge of the towel that had long since lost its place. "I don't know what this means yet," he said quietly. I nodded, head resting on his shoulder. "It doesn't have to mean everything all at once." He pulled me closer, arm draped over my back. "But it means something, right?" I looked up at him. "Yeah, it does." And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the need to define it. I just felt lucky to be in it. The days that followed didn't unfold like I expected. There was no grand confession, no sudden shift into coupledom. What we shared that night didn't immediately rewrite our friendship. It just added a layer to it, a quiet thread we both seemed content to carry without pulling too tight. But it was there, always humming underneath the surface. We still texted, we still joked, we still met up like we always had. But something was different, more charged. His glances lingered longer. His shoulder brushed mine on purpose. And when I touched him, even casually, there was a flicker of awareness in both of us that hadn't been there before. One evening, after a late dinner, he offered to walk me home, even though I lived only a few blocks away. We strolled slowly, neither of us rushing, and the conversation wandered from work to childhood memories to places we both wanted to visit someday. It felt easy and warm like it always had. But there was tension now, the kind that lives in the space between steps. When we reached my door, he hesitated. "I've been thinking about that night," he said. I turned toward him, heart suddenly loud in my ears. "Yeah?" He nodded. It didn't feel like a one-time thing to me. I swallowed, unsure if I should play it cool or say what I'd been feeling every day since. It didn't to me either. He took a step closer, our chests nearly touching. "But I don't know what it's supposed to be now. Like, do we keep going or pretend nothing changed?" I reached for his hand, threading my fingers through his. "We don't have to pretend anything. We just figure it out together." He let out a soft breath and leaned in, forehead resting gently against mine. "I want to. I really do." We stood like that for a while, hands held, foreheads touching, until he finally kissed me again. It was soft and slow, familiar now, but no less electric. That night, he didn't stay over, but 2 days later, he did. And this time, it wasn't on a massage table. It was in my bed. It started with his hands under my shirt as we sat on my couch, laughter fading into something quieter. He leaned over me, eyes searching mine for hesitation. There was none. I kissed him hard, pulling him into me, feeling every part of him respond with the same intensity. We moved to the bedroom, unhurried but certain. Every piece of clothing dropped like a secret no longer needing to be kept. I took my time with him, tracing the lines of his chest, pressing soft kisses along his stomach, watching his reactions like they were words being whispered directly to me. When we finally lay skin to skin, he pulled me close, breath warm at my ear. I didn't know it could feel like this. Like what? Like I'm not afraid to want it. I kissed him gently. "You never have to be afraid with me." We made love slowly. No rush, no pressure, just trust and desire woven into every touch. When it was over, we stayed wrapped up in each other, not needing anything but the warmth of being held. There was still so much to figure out. We hadn't put labels on anything. We hadn't told anyone. But in that room, in that bed, it didn't matter. What mattered was the way he looked at me, like he saw me fully, and the way I looked back, knowing I saw him too. It wasn't just about attraction anymore. It was about everything that came with it. And for now, that was more than enough. The morning after felt oddly normal. The sun filtered through the curtains, just like any other day, casting soft light across my room, warming the blankets still tangled around us. He was already awake when I opened my eyes, his arm draped over my chest, fingers idly tracing the edge of my collarbone. He didn't speak at first, just smiled when our eyes met, like he'd been waiting for me to wake up so he could memorize that moment. "Morning," he said, voice still low with sleep. "Hey." It wasn't awkward, it wasn't confusing, it just was natural. Like waking up next to him was something I had always done, something my body had been waiting to remember. We stayed there for a while, not talking much, just exchanging quiet smiles and touches that didn't need explanations. When he finally rolled over to check his phone, I watched his back rise and fall with each breath, thinking about how this part, the quiet after, was almost more intimate than everything that came before. Eventually, he sat up, running a hand through his hair. "I should probably head out." "Yeah," I said, even though I didn't want him to. He stood, stretching, and reached for his shirt, hesitating before putting it on. I caught his gaze in the mirror, and he gave me a small smile. "We're still good, right?" I sat up. "Of course we are." That seemed to ease something in him. He leaned down to kiss me, soft and slow, like a promise. Later that day, as I walked into my massage studio, I replayed every moment in my head. Not in the anxious way I used to replay things, searching for signs of mistakes or regrets, but in the way you revisit something beautiful because you want to hold on to the feeling a little longer. Over the next few weeks, we settled into something new. Uncharted, but not unsteady. He didn't move in, and we didn't start calling each other boyfriends, but we saw each other more. He came to my place after work. We cooked together, sometimes ordered in, sometimes didn't even make it to dinner, before ending up wrapped in each other. Still, we hadn't told anyone. It wasn't shame, it was protection. We wanted to keep it ours for a little while longer. Just us, without the questions or assumptions or labels. But secrets have a way of pressing in around the edges. One afternoon, I was giving a regular client a shoulder massage when she casually asked, "So, is your friend single?" I laughed, caught off guard. "Which friend?" "The one you were with at the cafe last week. Tall, dark hair, cute smile." "Oh," I said, pulse suddenly kicking up. "Yeah, I think so." I didn't know why I said that. Maybe because I hadn't asked him how he would want me to answer. Maybe because I wasn't sure what we were exactly. Maybe because I was afraid of ruining something that still felt so fragile. But the moment stayed with me. And that night, as we lay in bed, I finally asked him, "What are we?" He didn't answer right away. His fingers rested on my side, tracing idle lines, thoughtful. "I don't know," he said, "but I know how I feel, and I know I want more of this. With you." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Same. He turned to face me, eyes serious but warm. "Then, let's figure it out. Together." And there it was again, that word, together. Maybe we didn't have the answers yet. Maybe we didn't need them. Because every day, every kiss, every look said what words hadn't caught up to yet. This wasn't just something that happened. This was something that had begun. Fall crept in quietly, the leaves outside turning gold and fire red. And something about the season mirrored what was happening between us. Changing, deepening, settling into something richer. We didn't call it dating, not officially, but we were seeing each other almost every day now. Sometimes we stayed at his place, other times mine, always falling asleep close and waking up tangled in the sheets like we'd been doing it for years. We still hadn't told anyone, not because we were hiding it, but because we weren't ready to share something that felt too new and too important to risk outside noise. But that silence created a strange kind of pressure. Like the more we cared, the more the world outside our little bubble was waiting to burst it. One night, we went out to dinner, just the two of us, like always. But the restaurant was busier than usual, and the table they gave us was awkwardly close to another, where a group of people from my gym were celebrating a birthday. One of them noticed me, waved, and I smiled back, pretending everything was normal. I introduced him simply as my friend, and he nodded along, playing the part.
But afterward, on the walk home, he was quiet.
"You okay?" I asked. He shrugged. "Yeah, just thinking." I waited, giving him space. "It felt weird," he finally said. "Standing next to you like that, pretending I'm just some guy you train with?" "I didn't mean to make it feel like that." "I know," he said, stopping. "It's just, I want to be someone you can introduce without editing." That hit me harder than I expected. I stepped closer, placing a hand on his chest. "You are. You already are. I just didn't know if you were ready." He looked at me, searching my face. "Maybe I'm scared people will look at us differently, but I'm more scared of pretending you don't matter." I nodded slowly. "Then let's not pretend anymore." The next day, I told my sister. He told his roommate. Small steps, but they felt huge. It was like opening the door just enough to let the light in. And the thing was, no one freaked out. No one rejected us. In fact, most people just smiled and said something along the lines of, "Finally." We laughed about it that night, curled up on the couch, his head on my chest, fingers laced with mine. "You realize they all knew before we did," I said. "Probably," he chuckled, "but I'm glad we figured it out the way we did." He shifted, climbing into my lap, straddling me with that same mix of confidence and shyness that drove me crazy. "So now what?" I rested my hands on his hips, pulling him closer. Now we stop fighting it and just enjoy it. We kissed slowly, mouths warm and familiar. And this time, when we moved to the bedroom, there was no uncertainty, just trust, desire, love, not fully spoken, but definitely felt. And afterward, when he fell asleep with his head on my chest, I stared at the ceiling for a while, thinking about how quietly everything had changed. This wasn't just a thing anymore. This was real. This was us. Winter came faster than either of us expected. It wasn't the kind of dramatic snowfall that blankets the city overnight, but a gradual slipping into cold mornings, breath on the air, and nights that begged for warmth under shared blankets. By now, we weren't just seeing each other. We were part of each other's daily lives. His toothbrush stayed in my bathroom. I had a drawer at his place. We didn't label things, but we didn't have to. One quiet evening, we stayed in, cooking a simple dinner together. I stood at the stove stirring while he moved behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist, pressing his cheek to my back. "You know," he murmured, "if someone told me a few months ago this would be us, I would have laughed." I smiled, setting the spoon down and turning in his arms. "Yeah? Why?" "Because I didn't think it was possible to want something this much, and actually get it." I kissed him, not because it was the right thing to say or do, but because the feeling in his voice made something in me ache, in a good way. That kind of ache that only comes when you realize you're exactly where you're supposed to be. After dinner, we curled up on the couch. A movie played, but we weren't really watching. My hand rested on his chest, his fingers brushing my knuckles softly, over and over again, like he was writing something there he wasn't ready to say out loud. Then, quietly, he whispered, "I love you." It wasn't a big moment. There was no swelling music, no dramatic gasp, just a quiet truth placed between us like a gift. I looked at him and said it back. Not because I had to, but because it had been sitting on the tip of my heart for weeks, waiting to be invited out. That night, we made love again, this time with something new holding us together. Not just heat, not just comfort, but love. Real, steady, breathtaking love. The kind that didn't ask for anything back, but gave everything anyway. In the morning, as the world outside froze over, we stayed warm together. Eventually, we told more people, friends, family, clients who asked, and no one flinched. If anything, we got the kind of support we hadn't even realized we were hoping for. One day, months later, I was massaging a new client when he walked in with coffee in both hands, and that crooked smile I knew better than my own reflection. He waited patiently, nodding to the client with a familiarity that said this wasn't just my world anymore, it was ours. After I walked the client out, I turned to him. "What?"
He shrugged, handing me the coffee. "Just felt like stopping by, felt like seeing you."
I leaned in, kissed his cheek. "You always know when I need a reminder." He tilted his head. "Of what?" "That everything we've built together, it's real. It matters." And it did. Because love doesn't always start with fireworks. Sometimes it begins in silence, in touch, in friendship. And if you're lucky, it grows into something you never saw coming, but always hoped you'd find, even if it starts with a towel falling to the floor.